Thank you for tuning in to the World Builders Anvil, episode 276, The Chosen One.
There can be only one.
And it will be me.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build. Welcome back, chosen as always. My name is Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And the last man standing, I am Michael Miller. I was expecting you to push back once more on that last bit. So what are we talking about today? All this prophetic chosen one.
It was more, me and my addictive need for Elder Scrolls 6.
How soon is that? Is that soon?
Not soon. They're going to have a major AAA release before, so I would imagine 2022 at the earliest. Depending on how sales go and other things, if it comes too much before, then I would start to worry that they're trying to rush it out the door.
They could sell Skyrim another 10 times.
Oh, they probably will. I forget who it was. I think it might have been Todd Howard. Someone's like, we'll stop making it for different devices when people stop buying it.
No one's going to stop buying that game.
No.
The game is just too great.
But,
unless the new one's better. Unless the new one's better, and, there are things I liked better about some of the older games. And, but, really it's kind of thing about, every time they do it, it is the same basic plot premise, which is it's the chosen one. And are you talking Elder Scrolls
games? They're all you're the chosen one. You're the Dovahkiin. You're the only person that can stop the Oblivion Gates. You can save the Emperor. Blah 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 blah. And in a way, it's kind of I kind of wish they'd gone a different route, but I doubt they will. I mean, it's it's sort of like for their versions of Fallout, the idea of exiting the vault is very important to them every time. And
like to show that.
And once again, those are all chosen one characters too. And they're like a lone version of the chosen one in every instance. So, but it's like their plot du jour, or dur ever, which I enjoy playing. So this is kind of my thought on it. It's I don't know if you completely. There's a reason why the chosen one is so popular as like a trope. And if you go to the show notes for this episode 276 at gardul.com, it's GARDUL.com, you'll find some links to TV Tropes, which is a great place to look up tropes. And so, but I was thinking, sort of like there's actually a lineage of it, especially in fantasy. I mean, you think about King Arthur. He was the chosen one. He was the only one that could unify and bring peace to the realm. And, you think, if we go, do you think that Aragorn was maybe the chosen one? Some people would argue it was Frodo, and he was the chosen one to destroy the ring, and Aragorn was the chosen King Arthur of the story.
A
couple in there.
Part of me was going to argue that he was a chosen one, but he is. If you ask me, he was the one that, while the ring destroyed Sauron, Aragorn still had to kind of face him in a way.
Of course, yeah.
So
he was the only one who could do the ultimate victory, but it couldn't be done without the chosen one, Frodo, as well. So you actually have two chosen one characters. They have different things.
That's not chosen one. Anyway, no. My point is, I was going to argue you could say that that's not quite a chosen one. Like you think?
Yeah, you could probably make that
chosen one, the ultimate chosen one. I would say as well. Jesus.
That's sort of baked into Western culture,
right? But I think that's why it became such a powerful fictional trope, is because of Christianity.
And why it led into mythology and stuff like that. Because, you typically have nobles from probably
in the Christian era, all trying to associate themselves with God. And even well before the Christian era, you're associated with a God. And so the mythology of Jesus being chosen to save us, well, I'm chosen by God to lead this realm. I'm the only one legitimately who can do that.
Pick 3 fictional chosen one tropes, and I'll pick 3, and we'll see whose are better. I'm taking the Highlander because I said that before.
I was gonna.
You can't. I know you were gonna try to gank that on me. No, that was
try. Let's start off. And the ones I just said don't count, is what you're saying, like King Arthur.
No. Because there's a million of them, so we can pick a ton of them.
Okay, chosen one, Mad Max.
Oh, damn, that is a good one. Okay, how about Neo?
No, that's a good one. Let's see. What's something I've done recently?
I'm hoping you're gonna miss my last one.
I'm going to miss your last one. Well, I'm under pressure now because I have all the ones I was talking about stuck in my head. Let's see. Chosen one characters, science fiction. Luke Skywalker.
See, I was going to go Anakin.
Well, I think that's a fair thing because it's a different story.
Well, right. It is. I was actually going to bring this up when we got down to it lower on the list there, is point out that both of them qualify.
Sort of like Frodo and Aragorn?
No, because their tasks are...
They had different tasks that only they could do.
Well, yes, but...
Aragorn couldn't have destroyed the ring.
True. I guess I'm just saying that it's not. Well, okay. Well, then you could also argue that that Anakin is not the chosen. That Anakin is not the chosen one in the stories because Luke is actually the chosen one, and in the trilogy where they straight up call him the chosen one, they just don't know any better. And okay. You could also argue that Anakin is the chosen one. You could say that, the chosen one that'll bring balance to the Force. And if you think about it, he did. He wiped out the Jedi, making it a much more level playing field and balancing the Force out for light and dark. But just so happens that dark needed a hand.
That's what actually pulled him that way, I think, was, he had to balance it out. He was really true neutral. Just he looked chaotic evil.
All right. So what's the first thing on the list?
Well, hold on. We both got one more.
Do we? No, I had Highlander. Mm-hmm. I had Anakin and
Neo.
And Neo. That's my 3.
Oh, man.
You had Mad Max and Skywalker, so you have one more.
Okay, I'm going to say Ash.
Oh, that is a good one.
From Army of Darkness. Specifically, I'm talking about.
Well, if you watch the TV show they made, the Evil Dead TV show, they pump it up
more so.
Yeah, big time, and that show was really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now when they talk about the legend of El Jefe, and he's El
Jefe. Okay, so onto the specific show notes here. I think we want to point out one. This is probably one of the most common themes where you have this individual who's the only one who can accomplish the tasks needed for the story, which is probably why Frodo leans more towards the chosen one for Lord of the Rings, because that's really what the story was about. But I still argue Aragorn too. Just he's the side story chosen one. But the thing is, it's really popular, especially I assume everywhere, because the thing is, I think from a psychological thing, we all wish that we are needed, and sometimes we even do things in our lives to try and become needed. And you see it even at work where people will, try and hide all of the stuff that they do. So when they're on vacation, people be, oh my goodness, we can't do without this person. And when layoffs come, they're hoping to secure their job that way. Now, not everyone goes to that level, or at least intentionally, but it's something I think that just is in our psyche, so it's hard to get away from. The problem is you see it so much. And that's really my only problem with it, because I really enjoyed playing the Chosen One and the Fallouts and Elder Scrolls. I did. One of the reasons why I think Fallout New Vegas was so good, though, was you weren't the Chosen One in Fallout New Vegas. Anyone could have been the carrier, which I think is what they called him.
I think in most video games, if you're the protagonist, that odds are you're. What would you think? 50% are probably chosen one storylines.
Yeah, I would say video games, it's really hard to get away because, it feels so much more, powerful to you when you're playing a game where you are the only one. And I think it's one of the things that MMOs kind of struggle with because they try and figure out how to make everyone feel like the only one. And I think MMOs that go that way suffer because of it, because it doesn't feel right, at least to me. I'd also say, part of it's tradition. There's this idea that storytelling is a rhythm. And, it is one of those base rhythms that exists that's good no matter when or where you hear it. So those are really my reasons of, I think, why it's so important. And I think it's important too, but I think, it's like, it's important as a storyteller to play it just off of, not necessarily off rhythm, but make the rhythm yours. And so I was kind of brainstorming, how would I make this different? What are some simple ways? And there are ways too where people have played with it in storytelling too, because I think some readers are sick of it, especially if it's really obvious and it's not woven into a story well. Because they've read all of the classics, at this point, it's easy to get a hold of a bunch of different types of media, and you see the same stories over and over and over again, but they're still attracted to it as well too. So I think you have this dichotomy. And so I wanted to think up some interesting alternatives. And so I threw some out, and we could just brainstorm them out a little bit. The first one is the Megalomaniac. What if the chosen one was a megalomaniac? And not necessarily a villain. I think it would draw them towards the villainy side. And, through the storytelling, you can sort of choose which way they go. Do they give up a little bit to stay good, or do they go full out villain, which you could kind of go either way in that story. I think their own personal struggle with their megalomania, if they have one, which I don't know if you can technically be a true megalomaniac if you have that struggle. So maybe this is a borderline megalomaniac.
Well, I think
but this is not a health, a mental health diagnosis.
Well, yeah, but what I'm about to get into is that I think we need to qualify it a little bit, because if you're going to get into the good or evil aspect of it, we need to decide on a common morality or just ignore it altogether. The concept of something like Villains by Necessity, which is one of my favorite books, where the bad guys are the good guys. So it really puts a spin on morality and who the good guys are. So if you're going to talk about a megalomaniac and the chosen one, do you mean where it's a common, where there's an agreed upon common morality of good and bad, and that character has to bring about bad in the world? Or maybe just they're going to, doesn't necessarily have to be.
Well, it's kind of like too, it's like, I think anyone who seriously runs for president has to be a bit of a megalomaniac.
Certainly arrogant.
Well, I'm talking about like in real life, right? To sit there and go, I have all of the answers for, in our country, 330 million people.
I have all the answers for the next 4 years.
It's definitely an egomaniac. You definitely have to be an egomaniac, 4 to 8 years.
Yeah, 4 to 8.
So there's those trends, I think, in people who are drawn towards those types of positions, and it doesn't necessarily make them even bad people, right? And I forget who said this, but there's someone clever who came up with probably a wittier version of what I'm about to say, which is, the idea that just because someone has a lot of power and is making choices for a bunch of people, doesn't make the choices they're making bad. And that's why you when you look back at older countries, like in history class, they'll talk about who were the good emperors. You have that the first century AD, from like 100 to 200, or is that the second century? I forget exactly when they were, but when Trajan and Hadrian were around in the Roman, that was called the good emperors. And then then you talk about Caligula and most of the people who were related to Augustus Caesar as being bad emperors,
and part of it is it's the decisions they make, being judged by posterity as either good or bad overall for the nation they ran. And, I think a lot of good attention people might be megalomaniacs. So you can take even a philosophical approach to the story and say, megalomania is not necessarily in of itself evil, but it is the way you utilize it to what you do. So I think if you go with the megalomaniac, you can go with lots of different really interesting twists on the megalomania, the struggle to, of being on that line of what people consider good or evil, or because of your power, being able to make such decisions that people will choose whether you're good or evil, I think could make for some really interesting story twist off of the chosen one. It's really important to keep in mind too, that when you're the chosen one, you are, for purposes of the story, the only person that can do it, and people know it. It's not like you're an underdog, which you could go from underdog to the chosen one, which they like to do in stories sometimes too. But it's really, the idea is when it's the chosen one, everyone knows it, at least in the core of people involved in it.
Well, if and when you see the underdog to chosen one, would you call it underdog, or would you call it the hero's journey?
The hero's journey itself is really rhythmed around this, and you could do it. It's the starting point, but ultimately you're still the chosen one, right? Because you're the only one who can do this thing. So ultimately, I would still call it the chosen one.
And an important part of a hero's journey is that the hero has to do a thing, and at the beginning of the story, they cannot do that. They would not be able to do it
the journey
in any way. But at the end of the journey, they can accomplish it and often do.
Yeah, and usually you not usually, but as part of it, you need the sage to guide you to get to that thing that you need.
Yeah, usually there's the requiring of objects or what have you, but
it could be objects or an ability, like the Force, to accomplish what you're trying to do. And from what I read and from watching the movies, I believe it was pretty much when Star Wars was written, they just kind of took the hero's journey and ticked off every aspect. So, I mean, really, it's probably the best true example of a hero's journey, at least in modern fiction. Now, beyond Megalomaniac, my next one is the hated one. Because the thing is, typically in the hero's journey, everyone's appreciative of you. It's like you get a 10% discount at my store because you've acquired this level of hero towards the chosen one. You've now gained 20%. But what if you did it the opposite way, where the people didn't want the change that you were bringing? And so you are the only one who's going to accomplish the thing that needs to happen in the story, and everyone despises you for it. I think definitely from
is it a necessary change, or just
it would be necessary, but it causes too much inconvenience for whatever reason. People just don't like that you're doing it. Maybe it's disrupting their life. And think about it too, like if you're starting a revolution against an evil conqueror, them and their families are at risk. So maybe they don't appreciate that. So what if you're the only one who can pull it off? You need to pull it off, and everyone hates you because of it, instead of the love and adoration that typically falls upon. Now, I don't think this would work so good for a video game story, because people don't like to be hated when they're associating themselves with the character, at least not an immersive type of video game. But for written fiction, I think you could definitely hit some really interesting comedy rhythms by taking the whole idea that you're adorned for being the chosen one to being hated for being the chosen one. And maybe you can't even stop yourself. Maybe you're talking about destiny and you're being compelled to do this thing. Maybe you don't even want to do it. But those, almost like the reluctant chosen one.
Well, I was about to say,
everyone hates you.
There's actually a kind of version of what you're saying here in the animated movie Megamind, where he's the villain, but the hero wants to stop being the hero for a while, like he wants a break. And it's kind of like if you've ever read Good Omens, where they've been, villain and hero opposed to each other for so long that there's a camaraderie. So eventually what the hero does is fakes his own death, and the villain thinks that he's killed him. And then he reveals himself later. He goes, "No, man, I just needed a break. So could you just take care of things for a while?" And the villain starts taking care of the city because he doesn't want to destroy the city. He just wants to run the city. And he starts doing basically the stuff that the hero did. And people hate him because he's been the villain the whole time and everybody knows him as the villain, but he's now starting to be a good guy. So they, it's an animated movie for kids. So of course he's not straight super evil. It turns around. They start to like him, but it is a different play on the chosen one sort of thing.
Yeah.
Similar to what your hated one. It just reminded me of that.
Exactly. No, and I think I think everything going with here has probably been done, and it's probably a trope into itself. But that's just the way. Remember, storytelling is a rhythm. Once you start doing it, it falls down patterns that people associate with stories, or else no one understands the stories. Now, the next one is one I play with, which is the good, the bad, and the ugly.
I'm very curious what you're going to say for this one.
So the idea is:
are you referring to the Clint Eastwood movie?
Not to the movie, no, but I used it because of the movie.
Okay.
And in a way, maybe you tell me. The idea is you are chosen, and by the good, the evil, and the neutral forces behind your world. So you're really, really powerful, but ultimately you have to choose one of the three paths. And so two of the chosen one things will not happen, and there's a price to pay for it. There's a consequence. There's a cost, as I like to say, which there always is a cost. But and it's essential that there's a cost, even beyond just my obsession with making things cost. It's the idea of once you commit down one of the paths, you've essentially, because the idea a lot of times that the chosen one is being looked down upon by the forces of the good god or the bad god or the neutral god, and in this case they're all looking down and they're trying to get him to do their chosen thing. So at first they're enticing him, there's new powers, there's do this, there's do that, and then ultimately which of the three choices does the character make, which would be the climax of the story when they choose, and then the outcome is the consequences and punishing him and destroying his family and all the stuff that happens to heroes in Greek mythology. And I do think, look at Greek mythology, for punishing heroes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that earlier when we mentioned the journey, and also you said something earlier in the episode that reminded me of Ulysses.
Yeah, and it's one of the things, and I always like it was Greek myths typically have a couple things in common where all of the heroes have a great strength, which makes them heroic. Because to be heroic is more than bravery. It's like this exceptionalism / willingness to fight people. And but the problem is it's a deviation of that is always the weakness. So Ulysses is really, he's strong and determined, which can get him through problems like, a Cyclops trapping them on an island. But he'll become stubborn and do things like when he's escaping, blind the Cyclops, which then makes Poseidon mad at him, which causes him to go on an odyssey. So it's really his strength of will was the thing that made him a hero, but it's the thing that led to all of the problems that he had along the way.
Yeah, you don't want to be a friend to a hero in a Greek tragedy.
Yeah, you don't want to be noticed by the gods. The thing is, it's those people who are noticed by the gods that have these heroic gifts, but then
but they're always tested.
They're always tested, and it's always really bad. Typically, to be related. I think the thing worse than being the hero is being related to the hero, because typically, if you survive, it probably won't be a fun ride. But if you do, you'll have a happy ending, I guess.
Probably a really good story.
Probably a really good story, yeah. And then my final thought here is, I didn't put the rest of it in there. Is but
in the show notes, you mean?
Yeah. Let's see. I think I put everything but. Okay. For some reason it got cut off. Okay. So there's two more here. The Alliance of Heroes, and this is one where you are a chosen one for the story you're in, but it is a piece of a bigger puzzle. And then you have other people who are just as essential in their own way. And it's like a peer, it's like a group of Greek heroes getting together to attack Troy. So this one's probably definitely been done in there, where you kind of need all of them at different points. It's sort of like the Jigsaw boss in a Kung Fu movie, where you have to do a series of maneuvers. You usually need 5 characters to do a certain maneuver at a certain time to make them vulnerable so you can then beat them. And that's kind of the idea here, whereas, each of the characters, and I think this would go really good for an ensemble or a series of books where it kind of shifts the focus, each book from character to character as they achieve their part, and then the final book would be them all coming together to finish off the great evil, which is typically essential in the chosen one, unless they're, of course, the evil and they're facing off against good for the final time. And then this kind of actually goes back to what I was saying with the good and bad, the ugly. My final one is the character next door. I think it would be very interesting to create a character, and I know this has been done, but the character that lives in the shadow of the protagonist. Mm-hmm. So there's a big war, and it's going on. You're the sidekick of the superhero, or you're the you literally just live next door to them. You're a member of their household, or something like that. But you're always there, and it's the story of your journey of getting through their journey of doing the chosen one thing. Mm. Which is a way you can incorporate the chosen one, but you're looking at it from a different angle. And that's where you can kind of get into some of the stuff of sometimes maybe you resent them, but maybe you appreciate them more than you resent them because they're doing the thing that ultimately makes your life better if you survive.
I'm trying to think of an example.
The character next door should survive, I would think.
I can't think of an example of that one.
I can't, but I'm sure there's been, in most comic book team ups, there's probably been, villains made or new heroes come out of the shadow. Like you figure Nightwing, was always in the shadow of Batman. So,
oh yeah, I'm sure it's definitely been done in comic books, and Nightwing's a perfect example. Or pre-Nightwing, just Robin. Any story that was about Robin,
from the point of view of Robin.
Exactly. Yeah.
But so those are my ones: the Megalomaniac, the hated one, the good, the bad, the ugly, the Alliance of Heroes, and the character next door. Which, like I said, especially if it's a Greek myth, you're going off of, you don't want to be that in that story. But I think some of them might work better for comedy. But I think any of them, depending on how you structure the story, they could be dramatic or comedic in the sort of classic sense of those terms. Happy or bad ending.
I think that. Well, I was just gonna say a little wrap up thing. Like, I think the chosen one is it is such a popular trope for a number of different reasons. Mm-hmm. One being, I think it gives you focus. If you're just like, oh, this is the one character, this is what the story's about. Mm-hmm. You don't have to. There's less variables.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
There's less you have to work in. It's easier to OP a character who's been chosen, because that's, and maybe we'll do one on underdogs later. That'll be a fun one. I'll just save any comments on underdogs for later.
Oh my God, underdogs are great.
But we'll talk about those later too, and the good and the weaknesses about them. But I think one, people use the word trope incorrectly. They use it as an overused thing. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's just a commonly used thing, and they can be overused, and they can be done good or bad. And if you are lazy in doing, especially if it's more of a straight trope, I think it'll feel like a story that didn't need to be told to people. But that's not always true either. You always need a new Independence Day every
20 years or so. Not every 10, but maybe every 20 years.
Let's split the difference and say 15.
You know, there's something good and joyous about understanding and knowing the plot and how it's going to work out, and know it's going to work out in the end, and enjoying the journey getting there. And The Chosen One is kind of that story too. So it is really that story. It would have been another example of The Chosen One, even though there were two. There was a team, you know, that was chosen to save Earth, but at least in the original. But, you know, the thing is to keep in mind is, one, if you're ever attacking an alien planet, make sure to have your virus protection software updated. And, but, you know, don't be afraid of tropes. But, you know, I think when you use them, any tropes, keep in mind that if you change it just a little bit, you change the path just a little bit, even though you follow the general trope, it will feel exciting and new to people. And even if it's been done 100 other times before, but they've only read maybe that once, where The Chosen One they've done 50 times. So you take them down a path, you make them feel that they're going down a path, and then you shift the path, even if it comes back to the same point at the end. It's going to feel newer and a little bit more original to people who received the story. And ultimately, that's really, when you're storytelling, it's not about telling the story, it's about people receiving the story. So both things have to go into the calculus of storytelling. So go ahead, and for the world building task, this will be a shocker. Create a variant of The Chosen One. Just come with a quick plot based off of the characters and the places in your world that exist, and just think up what a Chosen One could do in there, and how you could tweak it in one of my ways or in one of your own ways. And hold on, I'm going to throw this into chat quickly for you.
I was going to say I can't see it. It got cut off.
For some reason it got cut
just
off.
Read it. It's fine.
Okay.
Real world task.
Okay, the real world task is going to be create a daily talking time with your loved one. You know, and this is coming from the space where I'm a guy, and sometimes we containerize ourselves, and we don't always necessarily feel like it's important. But, you know, talk about what's important, what's coming up. One, so you don't, you know, book yourself when you're needed for something else, but also it shows that you care for people when you talk to them, listen, and actually take in what they're saying. But come up with that time where, you know, especially if you're married or have a girlfriend, but if you're at home with your parents, talk to your parents about what's coming up that they need you for. It's just a good way to live your life.
Yeah, communicating with the people around you helps them to feel respected by you, especially if you're respecting their time.
Yeah, could you hurry this up? Oh, I'm sorry.
What's that? Well, I've had an interesting week. Sarah and I actually have not been able to see each other much for the past few days because I've been working second shift. So I've been working between 8 and 10 hours. And leaving my home at about 1 p.m. and not getting home till about midnight. So at that point, Sarah is asleep, and then she's getting up and getting ready for work while I'm still trying to sleep, and then she's gone, and then I leave before she returns. So we've seen each other very little for the past few days. And I also had something interesting happen at work where my one of the guys who works for my boss, who worked directly with me, under me, didn't show up for work. I was literally looking for his obituary. This is a kid. Wow. He's 18 years old. He was always very communicative. If he was going to be late, he would text me.
It was a no-show, no communicate.
No communication. I spoke with him he had to stop by one job site at 4 p.m., and I texted him when he was doing that. And then he was supposed to show up to the second shift with me at like 6:30 in another town like 40 minutes away. Never heard from him. He never called, nothing. And I was texting him and calling him for the next 4 days. I didn't hear from him Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I had his brother's cell phone, so I was texting and calling his brother, and I couldn't get any information. And I'm like, did he get in an accident? Is he in prison? Like, did he get arrested and he can't use his phone? Did he, like, what the hell is going on? Like, I literally was looking up everything I could through social media. I couldn't find anything. And it turns out he just decided to go work for somebody else. No 2 weeks notice, no communication about anything, just didn't show up for work. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I've been working with this kid for 6 months.
If you're young and you haven't gone through a few jobs, there's two things you should always remember. Never burn bridges. And typically,
and this didn't even have to be a burnt bridge at all. Like, here's what I want you to think about if you're young. When you're taking on a job, you have to realize that when you take a job, you're going, oh, great, cool. I'm going to have income. I'm going to make money. That's great. But what you probably are not considering and don't realize is that when an employer gives you a position, they create an investment in you. Mm-hmm. So you're important to them too. Mm-hmm. It's not like, no one's going to care if I don't show up. Well, they'll have coverage. It won't be a big deal. No, like, they're literally relying on you to take care of responsibilities that have to be taken care of. So your presence and absence makes a big difference. Mm-hmm. And all of that can be avoided with communication. Like, if he had communicated, we totally would have understood. When business is business, if he wants to go somewhere else, that's fine. But he didn't respect my boss by telling him that, hey, I'm thinking about taking this other position, and give my boss an opportunity to counteroffer. Mm-hmm. And
you'll be shocked sometimes.
What's that?
Letting your boss know can sometimes work out in your favor.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the whole thing left a bad taste in my mouth. I was tragically disappointed. I mean, yes, he's 18 years old. Yes, this was his very first job. And yes, it is a job that, while it is a job, it's also a career. So any person, if you're going to get into any apprenticeship, understand that the employer that hires you on as an apprentice is looking for at least the full apprenticeship commitment out of you. So like 4 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. And they're probably hoping for more like a 10-year commitment. If you plan on deviating from that, you have to let them know.
Yeah, because later on, you never know when you're needing that job. You've just burned a bridge back to that place.
Exactly. Or maybe not even that. Maybe it's a case where, we do a lot of sub work. So maybe he ends up working for a company that we want to sub. I'll tell you right now, I'll never take him on one of my jobs again. Not unless he owns what he did and makes up. I still haven't spoken to him. He didn't try, calling me because
that's the double whammy here is he wouldn't even respond when you communicated to him to say I took another job, because once again, when people know you as a human being, you think that they're your bosses and stuff like that, but they actually, even if they're maybe a jerk to you, if they're communicating with you to ask where you are, part of it is possibly caring about you as a human being.
Oh yeah, I care about him
as the job.
Definitely.
And that's really, to me, where you burn the bridge. Is like I could get over the lack of 2 weeks of notice, but the lack of communication, even when I reach out to you, that would be a burnt bridge on my side. So
the thing that cracks me up about it is he's like talking to my boss, and he said something to the effect of, I'm making more money at my other job as a server. And his brother works in a restaurant. So he's like,
that does not shock me. You can make really good money doing that.
Yeah, but not the kind of money you can make as an electrician once you get your license. Not even close.
Make it short term.
Well, that's my point. It's like, okay, fine.
That's a different lesson.
Maybe you're making $5 more an hour there now, but once you get your license, you're going to be making $15 more an hour here than there. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And not only that, it's a career path. So like, if you don't know what you're going to do, you at least have a solid career to do until you figure the other things out. So I was just, dumbfounded, mostly at the lack of communication. But
okay, well, let's wrap this one up, and we will see you all next time. Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.